My sister used my credit card for emergencies, then I froze it. Mid-wedding toast, the ballroom smelled like white lilies and warm butter rolls, and underneath that, faintly, the sharp copper smell of champagne that had been poured a little too fast. 240 guests. A string quartet playing something soft and forgettable near the entrance. A 5-tier cake that I happened to know cost more than my first car because I'd seen the invoice. And my sister, Renee, standing at the head table in a dress I recognized the second she turned sideways under the chandelier light. I recognized it because I'd paid for it 3 months ago. Without knowing, at the time, that's what the charge actually was. I want to tell you something about myself before I tell you what happened that night, because I think it matters, and because if you're anything like me, you'll understand exactly why it took me this long to stop. I'm the person people call when something breaks. The pipe. The car. The plan that fell apart 48 hours before it was supposed to happen. For 14 years, I've been the one who fixes things quietly, pays for things quietly, and never once asks for credit for any of it. I run a small accounting firm out of a converted garage 2 towns over small enough that I know every client by name, disciplined enough that I know exactly where every single dollar in my business goes, down to the cent, every month, without fail. That's not a personality quirk. It's not a hobby. It's the entire reason what happened next was even possible. You cannot catch a pattern you haven't been quietly, patiently tracking the whole time, even when you don't yet know that's what you're doing. By the time the DJ tapped the microphone to signal it was almost time for toasts, I already had the folder printed. 22 pages, each one highlighted in 3 different colors, depending on what kind of lie had been attached to it. I'd built it alone, at my kitchen table, at 2 a.m, the way I built everything that actually mattered in my life, quietly, and without an audience. I just didn't know yet, standing there in my sister's chosen shade of dusty rose, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, that I would be the one reading from that folder out loud in front of everyone she loved. If you're new here, this is the kind of story I tell. Quiet people, loud, entitled families. And the exact moment the quiet person stops absorbing the cost of everyone else's comfort. If that's a story that means something to you, if you've ever sat at a table wondering when it would finally be your turn to be believed, stay with me. Subscribe if you want more of these. I have a lot more to tell you. Now let me take you back. Not to the wedding, 11 months before it, to the quiet, ordinary Tuesday where all of this actually began. I'm the older sister. Renee is younger by 6 years, and in our family, that 6-year gap got translated early into an unspoken job description. Watch out for her. Nobody ever said those words to my face. They didn't need to. It was in the way our mother looked at me every time Renee cried, the way our father sighed my name like a solution whenever something in the house needed fixing. I want you to understand I didn't resent this, not at first. I loved being the person who could be counted on. There's a kind of quiet pride in being useful, in being the one who doesn't fall apart, in being the calm center of a family that otherwise ran a little hot and a little chaotic. I told myself that was just who I was. A fixer. A rock. The reliable one. Growing up, if Renee lost her retainer twice, in 1 year I paid for the replacement out of my babysitting money, carefully, secretly, so our parents wouldn't find out and add another layer of anger onto her already thin nerves. If she failed a class, I tutored her at midnight. Both of us cross-legged on her bedroom floor with a flashlight under the blanket like we were 12. Even though we were both well past 12 by then, because she was terrified of being grounded before prom and I was terrified of watching her cry about it. Nobody assigned me that job. I noticed earlier than I probably should have had that keeping the peace in our house usually meant quietly, invisibly, picking up whatever Renee dropped before anyone else saw it hit the floor. That pattern didn't end when we grew up. It just got more expensive, and it got dressed up in adult language that made it sound reasonable. When I opened my firm 5 years ago now, our mother needed knee surgery that her insurance only partially covered. I paid the rest. Quietly, I told her it was a business write-off, which wasn't strictly true, but it let her sleep that night without the guilt eating a hole through her. When our father's furnace died in the dead middle of February, the year the pipes nearly burst, I paid for the replacement too, and told him business had been good that quarter, also not true, but it stopped him from apologizing to me 4 separate times over dinner. Here's the thing I didn't let myself notice for a long time. Nobody in my family has ever once, not a single time, asked me how I'm doing financially. Not really. They ask what I can do. They ask if I can help. They don't ask if helping costs me anything, because somewhere along the way, it stopped occurring to them that it might. I used to think that was simply how close families operated quiet sacrifice, no accounting, no scorekeeping, love expressed through invisible labor. I don't believe that anymore. I think that's just what it feels like from the inside of being taken advantage of by people who've learned you'll never say the word no out loud. 3 years ago, Renee asked me for something new. Not cash, not this time. A card. I remember the exact moment. She was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd later build that 22-page folder, turning her engagement ring around and around her finger the way she always did when she wanted something and knew, on some level, that she shouldn't be asking. Just for emergencies, she said. Her voice had that particular softness she saved for asking me things. Car trouble, a medical thing. I don't want to bother you every single time something happens. You're already so busy. I remember feeling, in that moment, a small flicker of relief she was trying to not burden me. That felt like growth. That felt like the kind of boundary-respecting adult sister I'd always hoped she'd become. I added her as an authorized user on one of my business cards. A card with a $15,000 limit, mostly reserved for equipment, software subscriptions, the occasional client dinner. I told her the rule out loud, slowly, clearly, the way I'd explain terms to a new client. Emergencies only. And you tell me before you use it, not after. She nodded. She repeated it back to me, word for word, like she was reciting a vow at an altar. Emergencies only. Tell you before, not after, I promise. I believed her instantly, too instantly, in hindsight. But I didn't catch that then, because for once, I'd drawn a line, and she'd walked right up to it and stopped. It felt like proof that boundaries worked. It felt like proof that maybe I hadn't spent my whole life being quietly used, that maybe this was just what it looked like when 2 adult sisters trusted each other. For the first 4 months, she kept her word completely. Then, one small charge at a time, the boundary began to blur so slowly, so gently, that by the time I noticed the shape of it, it had already become a habit. The first charge that didn't fit the rule was $340 at a spa in a neighboring city. I remember seeing it pop up in my banking app while I was waiting in line at the grocery store and feeling more curious than upset. I texted her, Hey, saw a charge at Willow Creek Spa. Everything okay? Ugh, yes. Sorry, panic attack. Needed self-care. We'll explain later, she wrote back. Followed by a crying face emoji and a small pink heart. I remember reading that text twice, feeling a small tug of concern for her, and then letting it go entirely. A panic attack felt like a stretch of the definition of emergency, sure, but I told myself stress is real, mental health is real, and $340 wasn't going to break me. I didn't ask a single follow-up question. I think, somewhere underneath, I didn't want to know if the answer would disappoint me. A month later, $610 at a furniture outlet 2 counties over. Our dishwasher flooded and ruined the kitchen chairs. It's an insurance thing, I'll explain, she wrote, this time with no emoji at all, which somehow made it feel more credible, more urgent, more real. I didn't ask to see photos of the flood. I didn't ask for the insurance claim number. I trusted her. I want to sit on that word for a second, because it's the word that did all the heavy lifting in this entire story trust, right up until the moment it stopped meaning anything at all. By the following winter, the Emergencies had developed a pattern I should have caught far sooner than I did. They always arrived in a small, tidy cluster right before something photogenic. A getaway. A dinner with people worth impressing, an event where she'd be seen and photographed and complimented. There was a $275 charge at a hair salon the week before her engagement party, a party our parents had scraped together savings to help fund, not knowing Renee's own hair alone that week cost more than the centerpieces. There was a $450 charge at a boutique 2 weeks before a family cruise she and her fiancé Marcus took, a cruise our parents weren't invited on and couldn't have afforded regardless. Here's the detail I want you to sit with, because this whole story turns on it, quietly, in the background, the entire time. Renee carried a beautiful quilted handbag to that engagement party. Structured, pristine gold hardware that caught the light every time she gestured, which was often. It was the kind of bag that made other women's eyes flick toward it and then quickly away, the kind of compliment people give without meaning to, just a half second of involuntary admiration. Our mother still drives a sedan with a rear bumper held mostly in place by a bungee cord and a prayer, because she won't spend $200 fixing it when there are grandkids' school supplies to buy, or a church fundraiser to quietly contribute to instead. Renee knows this. She's known it for years. She parked her rental convertible directly beside that dented, bungee-corded bumper at Thanksgiving that year and didn't say a single word about it, didn't seem to see it at all. That's the tell, if you're looking for one. The performance of ease sitting inches away from actual unglamorous struggle, and nobody in the family ever once saying anything out loud about the gap between them. Every single time I brought the card up, gently, carefully, never accusing Renee, had the same 4 words ready, delivered with a small, practiced tilt of her head, that I fell for. Without fail, every single time she used it, family takes care of family. She said it when I asked, lightly, about the spa charge. She said it again, almost bored, when I asked about the boutique run. And she said it one final time verbatim, word for word, the week I finally sat down alone in my kitchen and pulled a full year of statements, because something in me, some quiet, competent, spreadsheet-shaped part of me, had already started keeping score long before the rest of me had caught up to what that meant. The total for that year, once I added it all up in a column with dates and vendors and my own memory of whatever excuse she'd offered at the time, $9,840. Not one single dollar of it tied to an actual emergency. Not one. The wedding invitation arrived 4 months before the date. Cream cardstock, gold foil lettering. A venue that ran $28,000 minimum for catering alone, a number I only knew because Renee had at some point forwarded me the contract just to see what she thought, never once asking me to pay for any of it, at least not directly, at least not yet. Renee and Marcus were paying for most of it themselves, she told everyone, at every single family dinner leading up to it, with the specific, gleaming pride of someone who wants you to notice the size of the number without ever having to say it out loud herself. I was asked to give a toast. "You're the one who's always been there for me," she said. Squeezing my hand tightly at her final dress, fitting a dress I would later confirm, sitting alone with my laptop and a glass of wine, had been charged directly to my card 6 weeks earlier. Logged in my statement, plain as anything, as Bridal Boutique, $2,140, posted 2 days after she told me the dishwasher story was still being sorted out with insurance. I didn't say a single word to her that day. I smiled. I hugged her. I told her the dress was beautiful, and it was that part wasn't a lie. But I said something to myself instead, quietly, in the passenger seat of my own car on the drive home, hands tight on my knees. I am done finding out about my own money by accident. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with every bank statement from the last 11 months spread out in front of me like a crime scene, and I built a spreadsheet from scratch. Date, amount, vendor, my own memory of whatever excuse she'd given me at the time, typed carefully into a column right next to the real receipt, side by side. So the gap between the story and the truth couldn't hide anywhere. The pattern, laid out in plain black 10-point font at 2 a.m, was almost elegant in how obvious it had become, once I finally let myself see it. Not $1 had gone to an actual emergency. Every single charge lined up, cleanly, precisely. With an event where she needed to look a certain way in front of people who mattered to her image. I didn't confront her that night. I did something quieter, something colder, something that surprised even me. I called the bank the next morning and asked, calmly, professionally, what it would take to remove an authorized user from an account without advance notice, and whether I could time that removal to a specific date, a specific hour if I chose to. The answer was simple: a phone call, a short hold. An effective time entirely of my own choosing. No confrontation required in the moment. Just a decision, quietly loaded, waiting for the right second to go off. I picked the wedding. The real turning point, though, wasn't the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet only confirmed what some tired, worn-down part of me had already suspected for months. The turning point was a text thread I was never supposed to see. 2 weeks before the wedding. Renee left her phone face up on my kitchen counter while she went to use the bathroom, and a message preview lit up from her maid of honor, Priya, glowing there in the dim evening light like something that had been waiting for me to notice it. Lol, did she seriously not notice the dress was on her card? I would have died underneath it. Renee's reply. Fully visible in the preview without me touching the phone even once, she never checks. Family discount lol. She'll probably even compliment it at the wedding I stood in my own kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold in my hand without my noticing. Reading 4 short lines that quietly rearranged the entire architecture of the last 3 years of my life. It wasn't the fact that she'd used the card. People make mistakes under pressure. People get desperate, get scared, panic, and reach for the easiest solution in front of them. I understand. That I've forgiven far worse. What broke something loose deep in my chest, standing there in the low kitchen light, was the lull. The lightness of it, the way my trust wasn't even something she'd wrestled with, wasn't something that cost her a moment of guilt. It was a punchline. A joke she and her closest friend shared over cocktails at my expense while I was somewhere else entirely, still quietly making sure her chairs got replaced and her hair got done and her dress got paid for. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that exact moment because it wasn't rage, and I think it's important that you know that. It was something colder than rage and clearer. It felt like a door quietly closing on a version of myself who had spent 31 years explaining other people's disrespect back to herself as misunderstanding, as love, as that's just how she is, as family. I put her phone back down exactly where it had been, screen down. Same angle, same corner of the counter, so she'd never know I'd seen anything at all. Then I went upstairs to my own bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and finished building something I'd only sketched the outline of before that night. A plan. Here's what I decided. Lying awake well past midnight, staring up at a ceiling fan turning slow, even circles above me. The kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts sound very loud. I wasn't going to scream at a wedding. Screaming gives people something easy to point at afterward. Look how she overreacted. Look how she made a scene. Look how she ruined her own sister's day. Screaming would make me the story, and the story would swallow every single fact whole. The way it always does when the quiet person finally raises her voice even once. What I wanted instead was for the facts themselves to speak, calmly, in a crowded room full of people who had spent years being fed a version of my sister that simply didn't match the receipts sitting quietly in a folder on my kitchen table. I wasn't going to expose the small things, not the spa day, not the boutique run in isolation. Those were survivable individually, forgivable even, the way any single mistake can be forgiven. What I wanted exposed, gently but completely, was the pattern, and underneath the pattern, that text message, that casual, careless cruelty, delivered in a way that could never be spun back into me being the difficult one, the jealous one, the sister who couldn't be happy for her. I called the caterer's event manager the next morning, a woman named Denise, whom I'd quietly befriended months earlier while helping Renee negotiate the original contract, and confirmed the toast order for the reception. I was scheduled second right after Marcus's best man. I printed exactly one page, not 22. One, a clean, simple, almost boring one-page summary. Total charges. Categorized by month. The words family emergencies, $0 printed at the bottom in plain 12-point font. No bold, no red ink. Nothing that would look like an attack sitting on the page. Just numbers. Numbers don't need decoration to hurt. And I made one more phone call, 3 hours before the ceremony began, timed for a very specific window, the exact hour catering would need to run the final authorization on the outstanding vendor balance Renee, and Marcus still hadn't fully settled. A balance I happened to know about because Denise had mentioned it to me offhand weeks earlier. A number they'd been quietly hoping my card might simply absorb, just this once, for the wedding obviously. Renee had said at dinner the week before, like it was already a foregone conclusion, like my generosity was a line item she'd already budgeted into her own math. I didn't tell her no. I didn't say a single word about any of it in advance. I just let the card say it for me, at exactly the moment it would say it loudest. The best man's toast was warm, forgettable, full of inside jokes about fantasy football leagues nobody outside their friend group understood. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, glass in hand, and did the thing I'd done my entire life at family gatherings without ever once being asked to. I made people feel safe first. That's the muscle I've built longer than any other. Comfort first. Always comfort first. I talked about 6-year-old Renee learning to ride her first bike in our cul-de-sac, scraped knees and all, refusing to cry in front of the neighbor kids. I talked about her laugh, the real one, not the polished one she uses for photographs. I told the room how proud I was of the woman standing across from me in that beautiful dress, and I watched her visibly soften at the table, watched relief loosen her shoulders like she'd been quietly bracing for something the entire reception, and it simply hadn't arrived. Then I set my glass down on the table, gently, deliberately, and let the small clink of it against the tablecloth mark the exact moment the tone shifted. I want to say one more thing, because I think it matters, and because I think Renee would want me to be honest tonight, especially since she's always said family takes care of family. I watched her smile falter, just barely, at the sound of her own phrase coming back to her from across the room. 3 years ago, I gave my sister access to a card, for real emergencies only. I want everyone here tonight to know that I love her. And I also want everyone here to know exactly what that emergency fund actually paid for this year. I read 4 line items, not 22. 4. The spa day, 1 week before her engagement party. The boutique charge, posted 2 days after she told me the dishwasher was still being sorted out. The cruise she took without our parents, and the wedding dress itself, charged the same week she asked me to stand up here tonight and say something true. Then I read the final line on the page out loud, steady, no tremor at all in my voice, though I could feel my own pulse in my throat. Total actual emergencies covered by that card over 3 years, $0. The room didn't erupt. That's the thing nobody quite expects. Watching stories like this unfold, it doesn't erupt at all. It goes silent in a very specific, very loud way. Fork stopped midair. Someone's wine glass clinked once against a plate, and then absolutely nothing followed it. 240 people, all holding their breath at the exact same time. At that precise moment, 30 feet away near the kitchen entrance, the catering manager's tablet chimed softly with a decline notice on the outstanding vendor authorization, a charge Renee and Marcus had quietly assumed would simply go through the way it always had. The way everything of mine always had for them. It didn't go through. Because an hour earlier, exactly as planned, I'd made the call I'd been carrying in my chest for 2 weeks and quietly removed myself as the backer behind that card, effective before the reception had even begun. I hadn't said one word about that part out loud. I didn't need to. The timing did all the talking I needed it to do. Renee's face did something in that moment I had genuinely never seen it do before. Not once in 31 years of watching her, it stopped performing entirely. "You did this tonight?" she hissed, standing up so fast her chair nearly tipped backward, catching itself against the tablecloth. "I told you the rule 3 years ago," I said, quiet, steady. The exact voice I use when I'm walking a frightened client through a very bad quarter. Emergencies only. Tell me before, not after. You've never once done that, not one time in 3 years. "It's my wedding," she said, like the date circled on a calendar was itself a legal defense, an argument that should have ended things right there. "And it's still my card," I said. Marcus, to his credit, didn't reach for me, didn't raise his voice, didn't try to smooth anything over the way I half expected him to. He turned to Renee instead, quietly, his own face pale under the reception lights, and asked her a question I don't think anyone in that family had asked her directly in years. Renee, is any of that true? Priya, the maid of honor, had gone the exact color of the white tablecloth in front of her. She wouldn't meet my eyes across the room. She didn't have to say a single word. I already knew precisely what her own phone had said 2 weeks earlier, sitting face up on my kitchen counter. Our mother sat very still through all of it, one hand pressed flat against her chest. And I watched her glance, just once, quickly, almost involuntarily toward the parking lot visible through the tall reception windows, toward her own bungee-corded bumper sitting there in the dark beside Renee's rented convertible. I don't think she'd ever consciously put those two pictures side by side before that exact night. Her daughter's borrowed sparkle and her own quietly held together life sitting 30 feet apart the entire evening. Renee didn't cry, not there, not in front of everyone. She left the head table for almost 20 minutes. When she finally came back, her makeup had been carefully repaired. Nothing else had been. The reception finished. Technically, people danced. Technically. The band played the songs they'd rehearsed. It was, on the surface, a wedding like any other family's wedding, but every single person at that table had watched something quietly, permanently shift in the room. And nobody pretended otherwise on the long, silent drive home. It's been 8 months since that night. Renee paid me back the full $9,840 in 3 installments, no interest, spread out over about 10 weeks, without a single family takes care of family attached to any of the transfers this time. I noticed that, quietly, each time a payment landed in my account. I think she noticed that I noticed too, in the careful, almost formal way she worded each message that accompanied them. We still talk, but differently now. Shorter calls. Fewer favors asked, fewer favors offered without a real conversation first. I don't think we're estranged, not exactly. I think we're recalibrated, which has turned out to be its own quiet, unexpected kind of relief, the relief of finally being seen clearly by someone, even if the clarity cost us something we can't fully get back. Our mother finally let me pay to fix her bumper, 4 months after the wedding. She'd never let me before that, not once, not in 15 years of me offering. I think something about that night, watching her own daughter's borrowed comfort exposed in front of 200 people, made her willing, for the first time, to actually receive help instead of just quietly watching me give it away to someone who never once respected it. I still have the folder. 22 pages, plus the one clean summary page I actually read out loud that night. I don't keep it out of spite, and I want to be clear about that, because spite was never really the point of any of this. I keep it because it reminds me, on the days I start slipping back into old habits, that the moment I stopped quietly absorbing the cost of keeping the peace itself didn't disappear the way I'd always feared it would. It just became honest for the first time in longer than I can remember. I used to believe that love meant never keeping score. That real family, the kind you're supposed to be able to count on, doesn't tally up who gave what, who owes whom, who's carried more of the weight over the years. I don't believe that anymore, and I don't think I ever will again. I think love, real love, actually means being honest about the score, especially with the people standing closest to you, because the ones who genuinely love you back will want to settle it with you, not just quietly spend it while you're not looking and laugh about it later with their friends. If there's someone in your life right now treating your generosity like a private inside joke, something to be managed rather than honored, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to scream to finally be heard. You don't need a scene or a public meltdown or a single raised voice. You just need to stop quietly absorbing the cost and let the truth speak calmly at exactly the volume you never had to raise your own voice to reach. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, or maybe quietly of yourself, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this one, quiet people, loud families, calm and deliberate reversals, hit subscribe. I have a lot more of these to tell you, and I promise you, they only get more satisfying from here.
आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। मुस्कुरा के बात करती हो, आदतें खराब करती हो। ना दिखो बेताब लगता हूँ, आशिक बेहिसाब लगता हूँ। ऐसा नशा है तेरे दीदार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। जिंदगी हसीन लगती है जब ये जालिम प्यार होता है। सांसों में सांस आती है जब तेरा दीदार होता है। नखरा है ऐसा मेरी सरकार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। नखरा इसका टॉप पर आती है टिकटॉक पर, नैनो से है नैन मिलाती, लड़कों के है दिल जुलाती, पिंडी में है चर्चा इसका, नीरा जितना खर्चा इसका। मैंने बोला इसको मेट्रो में बिठाऊंगा, कैपिटल ले जाऊंगा, F7 भी घुमाऊंगा, मोनाल भी दिखाऊंगा, सेंटोरस भी ले जाऊंगा। आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। मौसमों की बेकरारी को आजमा के जान जाओगी, हिज्र की आजमाइश में एक दिन पहचान जाओगी। कहना है मेरे दिल बेकरार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार